The unexpected encounter. It was a quiet day in the Elysian galaxy, a place known for its calm and peaceful inhabitants. The Elysians had lived for centuries with no enemies, no war, and no fear. Their ships glided smoothly through space, and their cities sparkled with a soft glow under the stars. Their society was built on peace, harmony, and respect. The Elysians were proud of their peaceful ways, believing that all life in the universe should live in harmony, just as they did. But today, something was different. A strange object appeared on their radar. At first, it looked like a harmless anomaly, just a drifting piece of space debris. But as it got closer, the sensors began to pick up something far more unusual. It wasn't just a piece of debris, it was a ship. And not like any ship they had ever seen before. This was a human vessel. Queen Lyra, the leader of the Elysians, was among the first to hear about the ship. She gathered her council of advisors, and together they stared at the image of the ship on the large display screen in the council room. It was large, jagged, and nothing like the sleek, smooth ships the Elysians used. It was dark, metallic, and looked like it had been through many battles. There were strange markings on it, signs of war and destruction. "This is unlike anything we've ever seen," one of the advisors said, his voice filled with concern. "It's a human ship, but why is it here? And why is it so close to our territory?" Queen Lyra's mind raced. The Elysians had heard of humans, but they had never encountered them. The rumors from nearby galaxies spoke of a species known for their strength and aggressive nature. Some called them the War Incarnate, a race that thrived on conflict and conquest. But Lyra wasn't sure what to believe. She had always been taught that peace was the only way. Could the humans really be as dangerous as the rumors suggested? She made a decision. Send a message to their ship. Invite them to meet with us. We must understand why they are here before making any decisions. The council agreed, and a message was sent. The crew of the human ship received the transmission, but there was no immediate response. For what felt like hours, there was silence. The Elysians anxiously watched the screens, hoping for a peaceful reply. But what came next was not what they expected. Suddenly, a transmission came through. The voice on the other end was clear and direct. "This is Captain John Carter of the Terran warship Valor. We have received your message, Queen Lyra. We will be there shortly." Queen Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The message was brief, but the tone of it was unsettling. She could hear the calmness in the captain's voice, but there was something in the way he spoke that made her uneasy. This was not how peaceful beings communicated. But the Elysians had no choice but to prepare for their arrival. The Elysian fleet was on high alert. Every ship was ready, every defense system was activated, but there was no sign of any aggression from the humans. It was as though they were waiting for something, just as the Elysians were. Hours passed, and finally, the human ship appeared on the horizon. It approached their fleet slowly, almost cautiously. Queen Lyra stood in her observation room, watching as the human ship moved closer. Her eyes narrowed. She had never seen a ship like this one before. It was massive, with dark, sharp edges that looked like they could cut through anything. It was like a beast in space, ready to strike at any moment. As the human ship got closer, it stopped just short of the Elysian fleet. For a moment, there was complete silence. The Elysians didn't know what to do. Should they greet them? Should they wait for the humans to make the first move? Then, Captain John Carter's voice crackled over the comm system again. "Queen Lyra, I am Captain Carter of the Terran fleet. We've come for a peaceful discussion, but I must warn you, humanity does not tolerate threats. If your people have ill intentions, we will defend ourselves." The words sent a chill down Queen Lyra's spine. She had been expecting a greeting, an introduction, perhaps even some polite negotiations. But this was different. This wasn't a peaceful envoy, it was a warning. A warning that the humans were not to be taken lightly. Lyra quickly gathered her thoughts. "Captain Carter, we welcome you to our space. We wish to understand your presence here. We seek peace, not conflict." There was a pause, and then the captain's voice came back. Peace is a concept we know well, Queen Lyra, but we also know the reality of survival. And right now, survival is all that matters to us. The tension was growing. The Elysians were not used to this kind of talk. The idea of survival over peace was foreign to them. The humans, it seemed, were prepared for something the Elysians could not yet understand. What was their true purpose? What did they want with the Elysians? And most importantly, what would they do if they did not get what they wanted? Queen Lyra's mind raced as she prepared for whatever was coming next. One thing was clear: humanity was not a peaceful race. And this meeting, which she had hoped would lead to a peaceful understanding, was about to change everything for the Elysians. As the human ship hovered in front of the Elysian fleet, the calm exterior of the Elysians began to crack. The first encounter with humanity had begun, and it was nothing like they had imagined. The first strike. Queen Lyra stood in her command room, her fingers hovering nervously over the controls of the communications panel. The human ship, the Terran warship Valor, remained suspended in space just outside the Elysian fleet. The silence that filled the room was thick with tension. The Elysians had never experienced anything like this before. Their entire existence had been shaped by peace, by a belief that conflict could be avoided with the right communication. Yet, here they were, facing the unknown. The human captain, John Carter, had spoken of peace, but there was an underlying threat in his words. Peace, yes, but only on their terms. What did that mean for the Elysians? The Queen couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. A shift in the balance of the galaxy that would change everything. Captain Carter, Queen Lyra spoke into the comms, her voice steady, though uncertainty gnawed at her. We are prepared to engage in peaceful discussions. Please, come aboard and let us resolve this misunderstanding. Her words were polite, carefully chosen, but they were met with an unsettling pause. The crew around her exchanged uneasy glances, the air thick with anticipation. The seconds stretched on like hours. Finally, Captain Carter's voice crackled back through the speakers. Queen Lyra, we're here to discuss terms, yes. But we won't be coming aboard your ship. You'll need to come to us. Her heart raced. A direct request for them to board the Valor. It was rare for the Elysians to leave their home ships. Their people prided themselves on their sanctity, their control over their space. The thought of stepping onto an alien warship, one designed for battle and destruction, filled her with unease. I understand, Queen Lyra replied, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil. We will send an envoy to meet you in neutral space. There was a sharp click, and then silence. No confirmation, no further dialogue. The human ship didn't respond. Instead, the Valor shifted position, its massive hull groaning as it pivoted toward the Elysian fleet. Queen Lyra's mind raced. What was this? Why this sudden movement? Were they preparing for a confrontation? Before she could process the thought, the communications panel blared to life again. Queen Lyra, Captain Carter's voice echoed, but this time there was no warmth, no polite tone. We are not here for diplomacy. Your time is running out. In a flash, Lyra's worst fears began to take shape. The humans were not negotiating, not trying to understand. They were preparing for something far more dangerous. Prepare for combat, Lyra ordered, her voice sharp, commanding. Shields up, weapons at the ready. The crew rushed to their stations. The soft hum of the Elysian fleet's engines suddenly became a loud, nervous thrum. The Elysians had never fought a war, not like this. They had never needed to. Their fleets were designed for peaceful exploration, not battle. The weapons they had were basic and not made for long-term engagement. But now, it seemed, they had no choice. The Elysian ships braced for what was coming. It was then that the first blow landed. A bolt of energy struck the hull of one of the smaller Elysian ships. The entire vessel shuddered violently, a ripple of shock passing through the fleet. The impact sent a wave of panic through the crew. The weapon was far stronger than anything they had ever encountered. The ship was still intact, but the force of the strike was a clear message. The humans were not playing by their rules. "What are you doing?" Queen Lyra shouted into the comms, her voice trembling with disbelief. Captain Carter's reply came immediately, cold and calculating. "We are asserting our presence. You will comply with our demands, Queen Lyra, or we will do this the hard way." Another wave of energy struck the Elysian fleet. This time, a larger ship in their center took the hit. The shields flickered before failing completely, and the hull began to buckle under the strain. The ship was beginning to list, its engines failing. Panic spread quickly across the Elysian fleet. This was no longer a peaceful exchange. This was war. "We need to retaliate," one of Lyra's commanders cried out. His face was pale, sweat beading on his brow. He knew that the Elysian forces had no chance against this kind of assault. But Lyra was thinking. She knew that humanity would not stop, not until they got what they wanted. She couldn't let her people fall into chaos. There had to be another way. "Activate the emergency shields. Initiate evasive maneuvers. We must hold them off until we can communicate again," Lyra ordered, her voice resolute. The Elysian fleet moved swiftly, trying to evade the human barrage. But the humans were faster, more precise. Every shot fired from the Valor found its mark, and with each impact, the gap between the two races seemed to grow wider. Amidst the chaos, Lyra found herself torn between two options: continue the battle or try to find a peaceful way out. But how could she negotiate with a race that had already shown their readiness to fight, to conquer? And what if the humans didn't want peace at all? What if, in their eyes, the only solution was total domination? As the battle raged on, one thing became clear to Queen Lyra. Humanity was not here for peace. The War Incarnate had arrived, and the Elysians were now caught in the crossfire. The human will to win. The battle was no longer just a clash of ships. It had become a battle of wills, and Queen Lyra felt the weight of it with every passing second. The peaceful Elysian fleet was losing ground, their defensive systems flickering under the constant assault of the Terran warship Valor. The humans weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting to crush any resistance, and every blow they landed was another reminder that the Elysians were out of their depth. Lyra paced through her command room, the flickering lights casting long shadows across her face. The latest attack had shattered the hull of one of their larger ships, sending debris scattering into the void. The crew scrambled to make repairs, but it was clear the Elysians couldn't keep up with the human onslaught. "What are they?" One of her top advisors, Commander Kale, muttered under his breath, his gaze fixed on the screens. "We've never seen such determination. They won't stop, not for anything." Lyra paused, turning to face him. Her eyes were sharp, her voice low but steady. "We've encountered threats before, but this is different." For the first time, she admitted what had been nagging at her. The humans weren't fighting like any species they had known. They weren't simply defending themselves. They were attacking with a cold, ruthless precision. The humans were determined, yes, but it wasn't just about victory. There was something deeper, a hunger to win, a hunger to conquer. "We must know more," Lyra said, turning back to the command console. "We need to understand what drives them. Why are they so relentless?" The fleet's officers were scrambling to gather intelligence, but they had limited information. There had been no direct contact with the humans except for Captain Carter's cryptic messages. The Elysians knew about humanity only from distant reports, an aggressive race, always pushing the boundaries, never satisfied. But that was just hearsay. They needed to know why the humans fought with such ferocity. "I want a direct link to their ship," Lyra ordered, her voice steady, though her thoughts were clouded with doubt. "We're going to get answers." A few tense minutes passed, and the communication channel finally opened. This time, it was not just Captain Carter's voice that greeted them. It was a room full of human officers, all gathered around a holographic table, their faces grim. Captain Carter's voice came through first, but this time there was something different in his tone. It was almost pitying. "Queen Lyra," he said, "I see you're still trying to understand us. You want peace, don't you? I can hear it in your voice. But the truth is, you don't know what it takes to survive out here." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "We've survived just fine without conflict. What is it you want from us? Why this war?" The human officers behind Carter exchanged looks, as though weighing their next words carefully. Then Carter leaned forward, his eyes locking onto the camera. "You think you know peace," he began slowly, "but you don't know survival. The galaxy is not kind to the weak. It never has been. We, humans, survive because we fight. Because we don't give up. Because, when faced with a threat, we don't hesitate. We win. Every time." The words hit Lyra harder than she expected. She had always believed that peace was the highest form of existence. But these humans, they believed in something entirely different. To them, survival and conquest weren't just a means to an end. They were the purpose itself. "Your race is built on destruction," Lyra said, her voice barely a whisper, more to herself than to him. "You live for war." Carter's eyes softened, but the pity in his expression was clear. "We don't live for war, Queen Lyra. We live for victory. You can call it war if you want, but in our eyes, it's the only way to secure our future. The universe doesn't offer mercy. It never has. And neither do we." For a moment, Lyra stood there, stunned. The humans had no intention of seeking peace. They didn't even understand the concept the way the Elysians did. To them, peace was just a brief pause between victories. They didn't fight to defend. They fought to win. At any cost. "Then why even talk to us?" Lyra asked, a cold bitterness creeping into her words. "Why engage with us at all if you've already decided we're your enemy?" Carter leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Because, Queen Lyra, we know you're strong. We've watched your people for years. You've got a unique position in this galaxy. You could help us expand, bring peace to other races. You could have power if you joined us. But," he paused, his face hardening, "if you don't want that, we'll destroy you. We'll wipe you out. It's that simple." A chill ran through Lyra. This wasn't just about defeating an opponent. This was about bending the universe to their will. Humanity wasn't fighting to defend their home or to protect their people. They were fighting for dominance, for the right to take whatever they wanted. "Your strength doesn't lie in your ships or your weapons," Lyra said, finding her voice again. "Your strength lies in your will to survive. And that makes you a far greater threat than I ever imagined." Carter smiled grimly. "And that's why you'll lose, Queen Lyra. Because you don't have the will to survive. You'll hesitate. You'll think peace is possible. And that hesitation will be your downfall." The line went dead, and Lyra stood there in silence. The comm screen blinked off, but the words lingered in the air. Humans didn't just fight for victory. They'd fought for survival, for their place in the universe, and that meant they would never stop until they had what they wanted. As the Elysian fleet regrouped, preparing for another wave of attacks, Lyra realized just how far they were from understanding humanity. The humans had the will to do whatever it took to win. And if the Elysians were to have any hope of surviving this conflict, they would need to find that same strength. But could they? Could a race built on peace, on harmony, ever match the fierce will of the humans? Lyra knew one thing. This war was far from over, and the real battle had only just begun. The War Incarnate. The darkness of space had always been a place of wonder for the Elysians. They had gazed out into the stars with awe, knowing that there were endless possibilities beyond their peaceful home. But now, that vast emptiness was a reminder of the crushing weight of the war they were thrust into. The war that humanity had brought upon them. The war that Queen Lyra was now struggling to survive. The Valor continued its relentless assault, and the Elysian fleet, battered and bruised, fought back with all their might. The weapons they used were built for defense, not for offense. Their ships were designed for exploration, not war. And yet, here they were, fighting a battle that felt more like a survival test than a skirmish. Every strike from the humans felt like a message. We are here to conquer. We are here to win. Lyra paced the command room, her eyes locked on the flashing screens before her. The Valor had destroyed 2 more of their ships, leaving a trail of debris in its wake. The remaining Elysian vessels were now outnumbered, and the situation was growing more desperate by the minute. Even with the strongest shields they had, it was only a matter of time before they would be overwhelmed. The humans were too skilled. Their tactics were ruthless and precise. Every move they made was calculated, and they seemed to anticipate every step the Elysians took. The gap between their technology and the Elysian fleet's defensive capabilities was growing wider with each attack. "We can't keep this up much longer," Commander Kale muttered from his station, his face grim. "The fleet is running out of options. We need a miracle if we're going to turn the tide." Lyra clenched her fists at her sides. She had always prided herself on her ability to think through problems logically, to make decisions that could preserve peace. But now, for the first time in her life, she found herself questioning everything she knew. The humans had taken everything she believed in, everything she had worked so hard to protect, and shattered it. "We need to find a way to understand them," Lyra said, her voice barely audible, but firm. "There has to be something we're missing. Why are they like this? Why don't they stop?" Her mind raced. Could it be that the humans weren't just aggressive by nature? Could it be that their entire society was built on conflict, on the need to conquer, to assert dominance over the galaxy? Were they born to fight? To never settle for anything less than total control? "There's no time for understanding now, Your Majesty," Kale said, his tone urgent. "We need to focus on surviving this fight. If we don't stop them now, we will lose everything." Lyra looked over at him, seeing the fear in his eyes. She understood his panic, but it wasn't just about surviving. It was about finding a way to end the cycle, a way to stop the humans from continuing this war, from continuing their cycle of conquest. If they didn't, the entire galaxy might fall under the heel of humanity, and nothing would ever be the same again. A sudden thought flashed in her mind, a glimmer of hope, though faint. What if there was something more to humanity's aggression? What if, deep down, they were not the war-hungry monsters they appeared to be? What if, instead, they were a race trying to prove themselves, fighting not for power, but for something even deeper? "Commander, I want you to gather all available intelligence on the Terran people," Lyra ordered, her voice now filled with a new sense of purpose. "I want to know everything about their history, their culture, their psychology. There has to be something that can explain their need to fight." Kale nodded, though he still looked unconvinced. "At this point, Your Majesty, we might be too late to stop them with knowledge alone. We have to consider." "I don't care if it's too late," Lyra interrupted sharply. "We will find another way. We cannot afford to let this become a war that consumes everything." "Find the answers." As Kale and his team scrambled to gather information, Lyra stared at the stars outside the viewports of the command room. For the first time, the beauty of the galaxy seemed distant, cold, almost unreachable. The threat humanity posed wasn't just physical, it was a philosophical challenge that threatened to destroy everything the Elysians had built. Their peaceful way of life, their belief that coexistence was possible, it was all being tested in ways they never imagined. Meanwhile, on the Valor, Captain Carter watched the Elysian fleet's struggle unfold on his monitors. He knew this was only the beginning. The humans were relentless, and they had no plans of stopping. There was a fire in their hearts, an unquenchable desire to win. But what would that victory mean? Would they be satisfied with conquering the Elysians, or would they move on to the next challenge? What would it take to make humanity stop? But even Carter couldn't shake the nagging question that had begun to plague him. Why had the Elysians put up such a fight? Why had they resisted? They weren't warriors, and yet they were fighting as if their lives depended on it. He knew it wasn't just about defending their territory. The Elysians were fighting for something more. Could they have a deeper understanding of humanity? Was there something within them that mirrored the very thing humanity fought for? Survival, purpose, and the will to win. Carter didn't know, but he was beginning to suspect that this war might not be as simple as he had thought. Back on the Elysian ships, Lyra's mind was in turmoil. She had always believed in peace, but now, as the war raged around her, she began to understand something. The universe was not kind to those who refused to fight. The peaceful races of the galaxy had always lived in the shadows, hoping that conflict would pass them by. But now, that hope seemed like a fragile dream. Humanity had come, and they weren't just here to conquer. They were here to reshape the galaxy. The question now was whether the Elysians could find a way to fight back, not with weapons, but with the very thing humanity had underestimated: their will to survive. Secrets of humanity. The war had raged for weeks. The once pristine Elysian fleet was now a mere shadow of its former self. Damaged, with fewer ships in its ranks. The humans were relentless. Each attack, each battle, had been a reminder of just how far humanity would go to prove its dominance. And yet, as the Elysians fought to survive, Queen Lyra could no longer ignore the underlying truth. They were losing, but it wasn't just the ships and weapons that concerned her. It was the humanity behind the weapons, the motivations driving them to fight. The Terran valor hovered ominously above them, its monstrous size dwarfing the remaining Elysian ships. The sheer scale of the human ship was intimidating, its dark, metallic exterior exuding an air of superiority. To the Elysians, it seemed like a floating fortress, a symbol of everything humanity was willing to do to win. They had no mercy. They had no hesitation, and they showed no sign of stopping. Inside her command room, Lyra stared at the monitor displaying the human ship, her thoughts swirling. She had spent so much time focused on the immediate threat, the human fleet, but something else kept nagging at her. The humans weren't just invading. They weren't just attacking for resources or territory. There was something deeper, something more complex driving them. The more she studied their actions, the more she began to see a pattern. It wasn't about blind aggression. It was about survival. The humans were fighting not just to expand, but to preserve themselves. For all their violence, there was something else beneath it. Fear. Fear of being wiped out. Fear that their place in the galaxy was under threat, and that only by conquering could they guarantee their survival. It was this realization that sent Lyra into action. If the humans truly believed that conquering was the only way to survive, then perhaps there was a way to end the war without total destruction. Perhaps, she thought, humanity wasn't as relentless as they appeared. Perhaps they were just desperate. We need to understand their history, Lyra said suddenly, breaking the silence in the command room. Her voice was filled with new resolve. We need to know what drives them. What's their story? What made them this way? Commander Kale, who had been standing at her side, raised an eyebrow. What do you mean, Your Majesty? We already know they're a war-driven species. We've seen it in their tactics. Lyra shook her head. It's more than that. It's their history, their culture. There has to be something about them, something deeper, that's pushing them to this point. We can't just look at their actions. We need to understand their psyche, their survival instincts. Why are they this way? Kale hesitated, but then nodded. I see what you're getting at. You want to look beyond the violence. Very well. I'll get to work on it immediately. As Kale and his team dug deeper into the Terran history and culture, Lyra couldn't help but reflect on the humans' ability to fight. She had always believed that peace was the way forward, that understanding and cooperation were the keys to survival. But humanity had proven that survival could come at a much higher price. Peace wasn't always a choice. In some cases, it was a luxury. And that thought unsettled her. Weeks passed before Kale returned with the information Lyra had requested. He sat across from her in her quarters, his expression grim as he spoke. The Terran people have been at war almost since their origins. Kale began. Their history is filled with conflict. They faced extinction more than once, and each time they'd fought to survive. Their entire civilization was forged in fire, Lyra. They fought their way from the brink of annihilation to become the dominant species on their planet. It's in their blood. Lyra listened intently, her mind processing the information. Survival. That's what this is about, isn't it? It's not about conquest, not entirely. It's about their fear of losing everything they fought for. Kale nodded. Exactly. Their species is driven by survival, and they have developed a mindset that sees no other way. In their eyes, any weakness is a threat, and their history has shown them that they can only survive by fighting. They don't know how to live without that drive. They can't afford to. Lyra leaned back, her gaze fixed on the stars outside her window. It was starting to make sense. The humans weren't just invaders. They were survivors. Every action they took, every victory they claimed, was about one thing: ensuring that they would never be erased from existence. And it wasn't just about their planet. It was about their place in the universe. In their eyes, the galaxy was a hostile place, and they had learned to fight for everything they had. They see the universe as a battleground, Lyra whispered to herself. And we are just one of many races they feel they must conquer to secure their place. Kale sat down across from her, his voice softer now. The truth is, Lyra, they don't want to destroy us. They want to absorb us. They want us to join them in this war because they see our potential. They know our technology is advanced and our people are strong. If we side with them, they believe they will be stronger. But what if they don't want us to survive? Lyra countered, her voice tinged with doubt. What if they just want to wipe us out, take our resources, and move on to the next race? Kale met her gaze, his expression unwavering. They would have done that by now if that was their goal. They could have destroyed us completely, but they haven't. They've given us a chance to prove we're worth keeping around. Lyra sat in silence, processing Cal's words. The humans had options. They could destroy them, but instead they were offering a chance to join them. But the price was steep. It wasn't just their lives. It was their identity, their way of life. Then we must decide, Lyra said slowly, her voice firm with determination. Do we fight to preserve our way of life, knowing that it may cost us everything? Or do we find a way to make humanity understand that there's another way to survive, a way that doesn't involve endless war? Kale nodded. The answer may not be simple, Your Majesty. But one thing is certain. If we can't find a way to understand them, if we can't reach their humanity, then the war will never end. It will consume us all. Lyra took a deep breath, her eyes burning with the weight of the decision before her. The fate of her people, of the galaxy, hung in the balance. The secret of humanity was no longer just a mystery. It was the key to their survival. But the question remained, was peace even possible with a species whose entire existence was built on the foundation of survival through war? The turning point. The war had reached a turning point. The once impressive Elysian fleet was now reduced to a mere handful of ships, their hulls scarred and battered from countless battles. The humans had not only shown their strength but their cunning. They had taken the fight to the very heart of the Elysian people, and their strategy had worked. Slowly but surely, they had pushed the Elysians into a corner. Every move the Elysians made seemed to be anticipated by the Terran forces. Every attempt to outmaneuver them ended in failure. Queen Lyra stood on the bridge of the flagship, her mind clouded with uncertainty. The war was no longer about tactics or strategy. It had become a test of survival. But survival alone wasn't enough. There had to be a way to stop this madness, to find a way to avoid complete annihilation. Commander Kale approached her, his face drawn with fatigue, but his eyes filled with determination. Your Majesty, the situation is growing dire. The Valor is preparing for a final assault. If we don't do something now, we'll lose everything. Lyra nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the viewports where the human ships loomed in the distance. The weight of her decision was suffocating. She had spent her entire life dedicated to peace, to the belief that every race could coexist in harmony. But now she saw that the universe didn't work that way. The humans weren't just here to conquer. They were here to survive, and their survival was the only thing that mattered to them. "I know, Kale," she said softly, "but what do we do? Every option we've tried has failed. The humans won't stop. They don't understand the concept of peace." Kale looked at her with a mixture of respect and frustration. "They never will, Your Majesty. Peace is a luxury we can't afford. The humans, they think we're weak because we don't fight like they do. We can't expect them to understand us. We've tried to talk to them, to reason with them, but their minds are fixed on survival and conquest. There's no room for peace in that kind of thinking." Lyra's eyes burned with a quiet fury. It was true. She had tried every diplomatic method she could think of, every way to reason with Captain Carter, to show him that the Elysian way was worth saving. But the humans were beyond that. Their desire to survive had driven them to view all other races as obstacles to their continued existence, not as partners or equals. Peace was a distant dream in a galaxy ruled by power and force. She thought back to the conversation she had with Carter. His words had echoed in her mind. The universe doesn't offer mercy. It never has. And neither do we. The humans had been through too much to ever return to a state of peace, and perhaps, just perhaps, the Elysians were in the same position now. There was no room for mercy in this fight. A sudden thought hit her. What if there was a way to turn the tables? What if the humans weren't as invincible as they seemed? They relied on their power, yes, but they had weaknesses too. Perhaps the key to surviving wasn't in defeating them head-on, but in exploiting those weaknesses, in finding a way to make them question everything they thought they knew about strength and survival. "Commander Kale," Lyra said, her voice firm with a new sense of clarity. "We need to think differently. It's not about fighting harder or pushing back with more force. It's about making the humans question their own purpose, their own beliefs. If we can show them that their approach to survival is flawed, perhaps we can end this war." Cal's eyes widened. "You mean, we should make them see that there's more than just fighting to survive? That maybe, just maybe, there's another way to live?" Lyra nodded. "Yes. We need to make them see that survival isn't just about power and domination. That there's strength in coexistence, in unity. If we can break through their belief that they must conquer everything to survive, maybe they'll stop. Maybe they'll see that there's another path." The idea was dangerous, risky, and unlikely to succeed. But Lyra had come to realize something. They had nothing left to lose. If they kept fighting the way they were, the Elysians would be wiped out. But if they tried something bold, something unexpected, they might just have a chance. They could force the humans to question their own survival instincts, to question whether a galaxy built on conquest and destruction was really worth living in. Lyra turned to her console and began issuing orders. "We're going to gather all the information we can on the human fleet. I need to know their weaknesses, any vulnerabilities we can exploit. We're not going to fight them head-on anymore. We're going to make them question everything they fought for." As the Elysian fleet began to adjust its strategy, Lyra's mind raced. She knew the humans would be watching, analyzing every move they made. They would expect the Elysians to fold, to give up and surrender. But what if they didn't? What if they could turn the humans' tactics against them, make them question whether all of this, everything they had fought for, was really worth the cost? For the first time in weeks, Lyra allowed herself to hope. Hope that there was still a way out of this, a way to survive. Meanwhile, aboard the Valor, Captain Carter watched the Elysian fleet's sudden shift in tactics with curiosity. The Elysians weren't retreating. They weren't cowering. They were adapting, thinking differently. It was almost as if they were challenging him, daring him to continue the war on their terms. Carter leaned forward in his chair, a slight frown forming on his brow. He had expected them to break by now. But they were still standing, still fighting. He had underestimated them. And now, he wasn't so sure about the outcome. The Elysians were showing something he hadn't anticipated: resilience. Lyra's plan was beginning to take shape. It wasn't about brute force. It wasn't about killing. It was about showing the humans that there was another way. A way to survive without conquering, without destruction. She didn't know if it would work, but she knew one thing: they had to try. As both sides braced for what was to come, the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. The war had become something more than just a fight for survival. It had become a battle for the very soul of the universe. Would humanity continue its path of conquest, or would the Elysians show them a different way? The final decision. The silence in the command room was deafening. Queen Lyra stood at the front of the room, her gaze fixed on the holographic map of the battlefield. The last of the Elysian fleet was in full retreat, their ships limping through space, battered by weeks of unrelenting human attacks. The Valor, that monstrous, relentless warship, hovered ominously above them, its weapons primed and ready. The Elysians had tried everything to break through, to find a way to survive. But now, with every ship almost crippled, the final assault was imminent. But there was still one chance left. Lyra clenched her fists, her heart pounding. She had given the humans a challenge, had made them question their own motives for war, for conquest. But now it came down to a final decision, one that would shape the future of her people, and possibly the future of the galaxy. A single thought echoed in her mind: do we fight to the bitter end? Or do we surrender, in the hope that the humans will allow us to live on, even under their rule? Behind her, Commander Kale stood, his face grim, his expression hardened by the weight of their situation. Your Majesty, we've exhausted every other option. We can't continue like this. We need to make a decision now. If we don't surrender, we'll be destroyed. Lyra turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mix of determination and fear. I know, Kale, but the decision isn't just about survival anymore. It's about what kind of future we want. Do we want to live under the rule of a species that only understands power, or do we fight for our way of life, our peace? Kale remained silent for a moment. His thoughts were clear. He had lived through the war, seen its devastation firsthand. He wanted to live, to see his people survive. But he couldn't deny the question Lyra had posed. Could they live under human rule? Could the Elysians simply accept that their peaceful way of life would be crushed under the weight of humanity's unyielding will? Your Majesty, Kale finally spoke, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. We can't ignore the fact that the humans are willing to destroy us. They've shown us that they will not stop until we are completely defeated. Their desire to conquer is absolute. But what if? What if they're not just doing this for power? What if they're doing it out of fear, out of their need to survive? Lyra's heart skipped a beat. Cal's words struck a chord deep within her. Could it be that the humans weren't truly evil, that their aggression came not from a desire for domination, but from a deep, ingrained fear that had shaped their entire civilization? Could it be that humanity was trapped in a cycle of violence, unable to break free, unable to understand that there was another way to survive? But the question remained, could she risk everything on that hope? Could she afford to believe that the humans might change, that they might listen, that they could see reason and cease their conquest? She turned back to the holographic map of the battlefield, watching as the human ships positioned themselves for the final strike. The odds were overwhelming. The Elysians were outnumbered, outgunned, and on the brink of extinction. Their only hope was to try something radical. We need to contact them again, Lyra said, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. This time, it's not about fighting. It's not about surrender. It's about making them understand us, making them see that we're not just an obstacle to their survival. We are a part of this galaxy, and we deserve to exist. Cal's brow furrowed. But how, Your Majesty? After everything that's happened, do you really think they will listen? They've already shown us that they don't care about peace. Lyra's eyes shone with determination. I'm not asking them to care about peace. I'm asking them to care about something greater than themselves. To see that survival doesn't have to come at the cost of everything else. Humanity has spent too long fighting, too long surviving through destruction. But that doesn't mean they can't change. If they truly want to survive, they need to understand that there's another way. A way where every race, every life, can thrive together. Kale nodded slowly, a sense of understanding creeping into his expression. You think we can make them see that? After all this? Lyra's gaze remained fixed on the human fleet, her voice steady despite the fear building within her. It's our only chance. With the decision made, the communication channels were opened once more. Lyra took a deep breath, her fingers trembling as she initiated the transmission. The image of Captain Carter appeared on the screen, his face hard and cold, his eyes full of determination. Captain Carter, Lyra began, her voice firm yet calm. This war has cost us everything. Our people are almost gone. But I ask you now, for the last time, is this really how you want to survive? Is this what humanity has become? A race that conquers, that destroys, that takes everything it can until nothing is left? Or can you see that there is another way? A way where all of us together can survive. Together, we can create a future where no one is left behind, where no one is destroyed in the name of conquest. There was a long pause, and for a moment, Lyra wondered if the transmission had been cut. But then, Captain Carter's voice came through, low and measured.